Ever felt like you were surrounded by zombies? This tagline adorns the poster of Edgar Wright's 2004 film, Shaun of the Dead. Shaun is a classic, and one of my favorites. A love letter to zombie fiction that can only come from real undead head true fans of the subgenre. The modern zombie, the shuffling and moaning George A. Romero zombie, has a kind of inbuilt social commentary, I think. It's played for laughs in Shaun of the Dead, but is also core to the title character's arc in that film. It's funny, of course, to watch Shaun walk to the store, so set in his ways that he doesn't even notice the beginnings of a literal apocalypse happening around him. But there is drama as well, when the film starts examining the patterns we may find ourselves in. That point when we're just stuck in place and rotting. That point when we're just surviving. All the way back in 1978, George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead spelled out this symbolism with all the subtlety of a shotgun blast. Upon landing their helicopter on the roof of a shopping mall, one of our main characters, watching through a skylight as zombies shuffle past lit-up storefronts, asks, "What are they doing? Why did they come here?" Another responds, "Some kind of instinct, memory of something they used to do." This was an important place in their lives. The mall, stores, buying things. Zombies are the horror not only of routine, but of consumption, going through the motions, consuming what they can, but it isn't really living, is it? There is an othering of the zombie horde here. Sure, they look like us, but they don't think the same. They'll eat you up if they can, and if they don't finish the job, you might just end up one of them. The zombie may be an embodiment of frustration with our society, but it's important to note that for all the faults of the undead, they never kill their own. It's no accident that most zombie fiction centers on an uneasy alliance of strangers that is almost always undone by the very people within it. A noted inability, when faced with an outside threat, to set aside our hatred, fear, or greed and just work together. It always falls apart.
Drag you out there and feed you those things.
Then there's the zombies. No concept of control or ownership, no fear, no hatred, not really. They just want to eat. For human beings and all our wisdom and ingenuity to be undone time and again by such a mindless and simple threat, isn't that the real horror on display? Isn't that what we should be frustrated about? We are them, but they're not like us, and they're just like us, but we can never be like them. There is a frustration at the core of zombie fiction. Whether it's an admittedly somewhat juvenile, makes-you-think view of the masses, or a very real lamentation of our own society's lack of community, you are meant to be frustrated when engaging with these works. It's through this lens that I want to discuss Capcom's Dead Rising. This 2006 zombie action RPG does some pretty incredible things in gamifying zombie fiction, and I want to talk about it. Dead Rising opens with a playable introduction, a helicopter ride into the quarantined Willamette, Colorado. Our protagonist, photojournalist Frank West, has hitched this ride into the middle of nowhere on a tip that something big is happening in this little town.
You mentioned something about research for a story.
That's right. Got a tip that something big's happening.
In a nowhere little town like that? They sure didn't mention anything about it on TV.
Yeah, well, I'm freelance, pal. I don't make my living waiting for the TV to tell me what to cover.
It doesn't take long for Frank and his pilot to see that something is very wrong in Willamette.
What is that? Some kind of riot?
The duo are witness to acts of violence as desperate survivors fight off small hordes of shambling attackers. It's more than a little telling that as Frank, faced with a desperate woman on a rooftop waving the duo down for help as she is overwhelmed and falls to her death, or a school bus, presumably filled with children, and surrounded by this clearly dangerous mob, the player has one option. You take pictures. There isn't even basic lip service given to the possibility of helping these people. Outside of their status as photo subjects, they are not Frank's concern.
Is this what you came to take pictures of?
Sure is.
Heading to the center of town, Frank is dropped off on the roof of the local shopping mall. Don't worry though, this game was not developed, approved, or licensed by the owners or creators of George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead. Says so right on the box. The survivors of what is now clearly spelled out as a zombie outbreak seem to have a good thing going here though.
What? Did you just say zombies?
Zombies outside, the mall is barricaded. Never mind. You know, it's always someone on the inside, like every time. Why is she so strong? Anyway, more people are dead now and the mall is overrun. The survivors of that very preventable barricade breach are now held up in the security room.
Where are the others?
I don't know. I hope they got away.
As long as those things are in the mall, we better not use this door.
The situation is hopeless, or would be if not for Frank's careful planning.
There's a helicopter coming. 3 days from now. At noon, it's my ride.
Is your ride reliable?
Absolutely. That's how I plan on getting out of here.
So we have 3 days, 72 hours in an undead-infested Willamette Parkview Mall to uncover the truth of this outbreak. Photojournalist Frank West gets out of here with the story and becomes world famous in just 3 days. This is where Dead Rising's full gameplay loop comes into focus. As Frank, the player can follow the main story in search of the truth behind the outbreak, but is also tipped off to other points of interest, called cases, through radio contact with Otis, one of the mall's custodial staff, who is back in the security room watching the monitors. Usually these are other survivors that Frank can hopefully lead back to the safety of the security room, if he cares enough. Thing is, Frank's time is limited. He has 72 hours that are ticking down, not just for him, but the player as well, and he can't be everywhere at once. These events are taking place at specific times, whether Frank is there or not, and even the main story is very much missable. Add to that the fact that not every living soul in the mall is exactly friendly. Some of these cases could lead to people who've been pushed over the edge by these apocalyptic circumstances, and have become what the game calls psychopaths, who attack Frank in boss encounters.
This is my stuff!
It's also worth pointing out that even taking these radio calls is tinged with irritation, as Frank is unable to attack or defend himself while on a call with Otis. The janitor will even berate Frank for cutting him off if he has the gall to do something super rude, like getting bitten mid-conversation. Frank himself is, however, not without means of fighting back. As a matter of fact, nearly everything in the mall not bolted down can be used to battle undead and hostile living alike. A mall, of course, has different stores, and each has its own potential weapons. A sledgehammer or chainsaw from the hardware store will be more effective, of course, than a handful of CDs from the music shop, but even things like trash cans, benches, and cash registers can be made use of in a panic, and you will find yourself in a panic. Even if you do get your hands on a gun store firearm or katana from the novelty weapon shop, ammo count and durability make any one weapon not long for this world. Preparedness and a familiarity with the mall are rewarded, as the player learns what weapons and healing items are where, and what's worth bringing along or scrambling for when things go pear-shaped. Surrounded on all sides by death, with a ticking time limit, trying to escort panicking people, making stupid decisions, and fighting off attackers with guns that run dry and melee weapons that deteriorate in your hands, all while an annoying janitor in your ear tells you about even more stupid people that need your help. Dead Rising is a game made up almost entirely of mechanics that many gamers are very loud about hating. Almost every core mechanic here, be they escort missions, an overworld timer, or weapon durability, is a deadly sin of game design to a lot of folks, and Dead Rising is like so real for that. It's important to remember that as Frank West, we don't like these people very much. He shows no concern for anyone specifically in that intro, even as he watches them die. He's not here to help anyone or to make the situation better, he's here to get famous.
It's Frank. Frank West. Remember that name, because the whole world's gonna know it in 3 days, when I get the scoop.
Frank West, photojournalist, is not a good person.
You're one hell of a journalist, aren't you, Frank? A hot-headed, underhanded, hotshot paparazzi with nothing better to do than to invade people's privacy.
I try. You got a point?
At least, not at the start. What I haven't mentioned yet is that Dead Rising has a leveling system. Prestige points, also known as PP, do not laugh, are rewarded for actions Frank can take over the course of his time in Willamette. Things like specific zombie kill thresholds, defeating psychopaths, taking high point value pictures, and yes, saving people. The levels carry over from run to run, and attacking the game better, stronger, and faster with a powered up Frank and knowledge of the mall and future events to try and score that perfect run becomes the main gameplay hook of Dead Rising. You learn how best to spend your time on saving people while still getting the scoop, and through the mechanics, the player makes Frank into a better person whether he likes it or not. But just because we save these people doesn't mean we like them. I'll be real, the AI in this game can be infuriating to try and wrangle back to the safety of the security room. Each survivor behaves just that little bit differently, and some of them are dead set on running into zombie hordes instead of just going where I tell you, Kindle, and that's if you didn't have to actively talk them off a ledge to get them to follow you back to safety in the first place. Here's hoping you don't end up bringing these doofuses to a boss fight by mistake. Between a psychopath trying to kill you, one moron trying to go all Rambo on zombies, and some people that need you to literally hold their hands to get them to go anywhere, and the fact that some of them may even start a mutiny once brought back to safety, your faith in humanity will be at an all-time low. This honestly insane behavior from Dead Rising survivors makes you feel like you're the only sane person with a decent head on their shoulders, and yep, your weapon just broke, and Otis, buddy, I am a little busy right now. If you're ever looking for an example of how mechanics, no matter how inconvenient, are just as much a part of a video game's art as its story, setting, or characters, Dead Rising is it. This game makes us feel like Frank West, not in spite of its mechanical frustrations, but because of them. I wholeheartedly believe that smoothing any of that over, sanding down any of that janky texture for a smoother experience would make Dead Rising lesser. I am well aware that many view game design exclusively through a lens of convenience or intuition, but I am of the opinion that feeling good or even being fun aren't the only goals a video game need aim for. Channeling frustration and using that to create an experience, I think, can be just as valid and just as engaging. Dead Rising is frustrating to play a lot of the time, but that frustration with these people, whether the survivors or bosses, has got to be how Frank feels in these moments as well. I don't know if I have ever felt more connected with a character than I do Frank West as he is dealing with panicking people in hordes of zombies. This game makes me so mad sometimes, and I honestly think that might be the point. They could have made the survivors super smart or even just teleport to safety. The weapons could be unbreakable and the time limit could have been removed. That might have made the game more fun moment to moment, but I just don't think it would hit the same. As I said before, frustration is core to zombie fiction. Whether it's feeling like everyone around you is dumber than rocks, knowing that existing power structures would sooner protect themselves before anyone else, or getting capital A angry at the lack of community and selfishness many people display in crisis situations, Dead Rising, through its gameplay, makes you feel all of that. But it's also a call to resist that urge to leave these terminally stupid people to their fates. I said before that Frank West isn't a good person at the start of the game, but he's not a bad person either. Out of all the ways to level up, it's important to note that Frank gets the most prestige points for saving people, and leveling up only makes him better at doing just that. Through Dead Rising's leveling system, we steer Frank into being the kind of person we should be in a crisis, the kind that helps people. There is a lot to like about Dead Rising. I can bang on and on about what the game says to me thematically, but it's not exactly an accident that what Dead Rising is usually remembered for by most gamers is as a game where you kill a whole lot of zombies, and it's true. You can kill a whole lot of zombies in Dead Rising, and oftentimes in really fun ways. The game even tracks the number killed and rewards you for it. While I do feel frustration is key to zombie fiction, the other side of that coin that I've neglected up till now is the roleplay. Zombie stories basically invite the audience along as plans are made and beg what you would do differently in that same situation. It is a very particular kind of fun, and Dead Rising facilitates that roleplay better than any game before it. What weapon do you reach for? What routes do you stick to? Who is actually worth saving?
Fantastic.
While I do honestly believe that the leveling mechanics push Frank towards being a better person and saving as many people as possible, it is still very much the player's choice to make. As Frank, we can hoard our time and ignore these people in trouble to focus exclusively on the selfish goals he started the game with. We can engage with the leering and objectifying lens of Frank's camera as we look at someone in need of help and choose to snap a dramatic photo instead of offering assistance. When asked for a photo that might titillate, we can choose to be a scumbag and take pervy shots of a fellow survivor instead of waiting for a consenting party to provide that kind of content. We can see a survivor with an item or weapon we might want and decide to enact violence on that person to take what we see as ours. We can be the villain in so many zombie stories if those are the choices we want to make. And that, to me, is what makes Dead Rising peak zombie art. It asks a lot of the same questions any work in the genre does, but specifically does so through the many choices its gameplay systems facilitate. Dead Rising asks the player what is most important in a situation like this, not through some dialogue exchange or binary moral choice system, but by limiting the player's time and watching what choices the player makes because of that limitation. There are good deeds to be done and people to save, but those same people often make it harder and more frustrating than it should be to help them, because the moral path is often the hardest. And if Frank succumbs to darker impulses, that isn't even a fail state. It's just another choice he made and life goes on. After all, in these kinds of stories where everything breaks down, who is left to judge us at the end of the world but ourselves? And through its looping gameplay over multiple runs, Dead Rising can ask how things would go and what kind of person we'd be if we could do it all over again. Better, right? I'd like to think so.